Hello, welcome back to Wine Reform. So today we go back to our wines of pop culture, and we are going to explore another fruit wine through Hozier's powerful song, Cherry Wine. Now, a little bit about Cherry Wine, as it is a really somber and serious song with an extremely serious subject. So, Cherry Wine is a song that details the vicious cycle of justification from the perspective of a male being abused by his female partner. In the chorus, and this is where the title comes from, in the chorus Hozier says, "Open hand or closed fist would be fine. The blood is rare and sweet as cherry wine." So he's juxtaposing the blood and the cherry wine to bring emphasis to how addictive this bad situation is for him, the abused. He's intoxicated by his abuser, and he's not fully accepting the fact that he would be better off without her. So he compares this situation of his to how easy it is to become drunk off of cherry wine because it's so sweet that the drinker doesn't know that they've had too much until they're already gone. Hozier created this song to raise awareness of domestic violence and to give people resources if they are being abused or if they know someone who's being abused. On his page, on his webpage, which I'll link below, he details not only that abuse is physical, but it can also be emotional or psychological. And it became the face of the campaign, #FaceUpToDomesticViolence. So not only did the proceedings from sales of that song go to charities which support victims and survivors, but on his webpage there's a compilation of resources listed by country. And especially since there has been a rise of domestic violence since lockdown, I'm going to link those resources in the description below. And in case you need help pinpointing signs of abuse, I will leave the resource in the description below as well. So if someone you know, or if you yourself are a victim of abuse, then please use these resources, starting with your local helpline. Somber and serious, noted, the cherry wine does have a very heavy association with Hozier's song, as his song is the most recent and most popular one to detail cherry wine. However, it's shown up in a lot of other music as well. So Jimmie Rodgers wrote and sang and performed Blue Yodel No. 1, or T for Texas, in 1927. And he says, "I'm going where the water drinks like cherry wine. Ding on, boys, ding 'em. Lord, I'm going where the water drinks like cherry wine, 'cause the Georgia water tastes like turpentine." So, interestingly, both Rodgers and Hozier really note the addictiveness of this cherry wine, whereas Hozier uses it as a juxtaposition for a bad situation. Rodgers is just acknowledging the pleasure of drinking cherry wine. And it's not just in country, it's actually shown up in the Foo Fighters song Summer's End. And so here's that line. "Loving lips and cherry wine, moonshine in your hair, just keep staring at the sun, pray for summer's end." And cherry wine is part of Dave Grohl's Summer in the Virginia Countryside with his summer lover. And so it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of sits in the middle in terms of he acknowledges the sweetness of it, but that situation with the summer lover is, it may or may not be healthy. So I put that wine reference in between Jimmie Rodgers and Hozier's. But that's not even the tip of the iceberg. When it comes to cherry wine references in music, it's actually shown up quite a bit. And there's so many, I'll link them, you'll see them. Cherry wine has a strong association in the US with the country, with home kitchens and cellars and woodsheds, and that's because a lot of the recipes in the US for cherry wine came out of the Prohibition and Depression era, and so these were home brews, and if people have never tried a homebrew before, it can be a hit or miss. Cherry wine is more often than not made in the Midwest due to cherry trees doing so well. However, outside of the US, there is a growing Danish wine revolution that is centered on cherry wine. So in Denmark, cherry wine is called kirsebærvin. Frederiksdal Estate is at the helm of giving cherry wine a glowing reputation. Just a brief history on cherry wine in Denmark. During World War II, wine grapes were not available to the Danish people, so they started using their local cherry to make their own cheap cherry wines at home. Obviously, the war ended, but once the war ended, the wine grapes and the wine came flowing back into Denmark, and so the sweet fruit wines they had been making at home really fell out of favor. They had kind of gained a reputation as being a very cheap and sugary drink. However, in 2008, when Frederiksdal began using the cherries from their orchard to make cherry wine, the perception of that started changing. Frederiksdal wine is made from the local Stevensbær cherries, and their cherry wine is definitely more akin to port because of how they make it, as well as the fact that their process really relies heavily upon quality ingredients and their well cared for orchard, kind of like how biodynamic grape wine is made, which I found quite interesting. But today, we're not going to try the Danish wine, we're not going to try the Midwest wine, we are trying another fruit wine from Honeywood Winery in Oregon. Oregon cherry wine. Again, there's no year on this fruit wine. Kind of like with the elderberry wine, the cherry wine has no year to indicate when those cherries were picked, but according to the website, it's not on the bottle, the cherries are all from around the Willamette Valley, and they use all Bing cherries for this wine. So the Bing cherry is a popular export of Oregon, but it is extra sweet. So I'm kind of expecting a fruit wine that's more akin to something I would pair with a dessert than something I would pair with a savory meal. And actually, I don't know if you may or may not be able to see, but there's a bit of sediment at the bottom, and I think that's just like a deposit of sugar. So very sweet. I'm expecting something extremely saccharine. All right, let's see what we get. But before we get tasting, as you all probably know, everything in moderation. And this especially goes for mind-altering substances. And wine is a mind-altering substance. The alcohol in it will cloud up your mind. I found this extremely important to mention, especially after Hozier's line about acknowledging the addictiveness of cherry wine. So I found it most prudent to verbally acknowledge. After all, it is better for you and for the people around you to enjoy things in moderation and, you know, keep your wits about you while you're doing it. Because nobody wants to get lost to a substance. You want to enjoy something, but you don't want to be a slave to it. So drink responsibly. And because we are going to be tasting, we're only going to pour a little bit. So because of how sweet I'm expecting this wine to be, I made sure to chill it thoroughly, and I'm touching the bottle now, and it's still fairly cool to the touch. Generally, the sweeter something is, the colder you're going to want to drink it. Otherwise, otherwise it could be cloying. So I did chill it quite a bit. The first thing we do when we evaluate a wine, as always, is we look at it. It is a fruit wine, however, I will be evaluating it the same way I evaluated elderberry wine, the same way I evaluate a vitis vinifera wine. We're just going to go through those steps. So, step number 1, look at the appearance. So, holding it over the paper now, it has a fairly garnet color that's extremely pale in intensity. I can see all the way through it, really. It's like looking through cellophane. Well, color-wise. I'm seeing the tiniest bit of deposits. I imagine that's just from the high concentration of sugars, because they look colorless, so I think it's just sugar. Garnet color, extremely pale intensity. So the second thing we do when we evaluate wine is we smell it. It's also known as evaluating the nose. So we're just going to go ahead and give it a sniff and see what we get. Okay, so it does smell good. It does smell pretty damn good, but it doesn't smell complex. It really only gives off the aromas of cherries and alcohol. I'm not getting really anything else out of it. So I'm gonna say that this is a very, very simple wine, which I suppose is to be expected for fruit wines, as it is more common when drinking a fruit wine that you only get the aroma compounds of that particular fruit. That's most common. So yes, this cherry wine it smells nice, but it smells very simple. So now that we have given it a sniff, we get to give it a taste. That is also known as evaluating the palate. This is when we're going to be tasting for those flavors we can get out of it, any intensity, the alcohol, mouthfeel, yada yada yada. So let's just get into it. Okay, so it was simple. Like the nose, the palate was extremely simple. You get cherries. That's the flavor you get. However, it was balanced. So when I was expecting something to be, I was expecting this Bing cherry wine to be extremely saccharine. However, I think they added an acid blend because I salivated quite a bit on the sides of my tongue, and that helped it feel refreshing. So it was cherry flavor, it was sweet, it was high acidity. The alcohol felt medium. The finish was very short, but the mouthfeel felt very light, but the flavor intensity was actually medium. So I gotta say that while the flavor compounds themselves were not complex, the balance that went into this particular wine is very pleasing. So it is simple but delicious. If you're looking to try something a little different that you want to pair with desserts extremely easily, or just, you know, soft cheeses very easily, I really do think a cherry wine would be a really good way to go. I think that it's fun to try something different, and it's not overwhelming at all. So I think that as long as you know that when you drink a cherry wine, you're going to get something extremely simple, and you're happy with that, then absolutely try one. I think it was well worth it. It is still very sweet though. Still very sweet. This wine just feels so darn cottagecore. I mean, like, look at that. I mean, look at that. Look at that. It's just... This wine is like the epitome of cottagecore. It makes me want to go pick flowers. I mean, like, not that there are any flowers to be had, it just snowed, but I want to pick flowers. And bake bread. I think I just want to be like those cottagecore TikTokers right now, because this wine is just really making me feel like some sort of prairie princess. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Wine Reform. If you like what you saw, be sure to give me a thumbs up. It lets me know that I should be putting out more content, kind of like this one, and it lets YouTube know that this is something worth watching for those who are interested in getting into wine. I know that when you are, especially when it comes to wine, it can be an intimidating subject, which it shouldn't be because it's so human. But, you know, if someone's looking for an in, you liking this video, telling YouTube, hey, someone should see this, you're giving them an in, you're doing them a favor. Pat yourself on the back. You're doing great. If you haven't done so already and you really do like what I'm putting out, be sure to subscribe. I release videos every single Friday. And if you do want to be notified when I do release a video, then hit the bell icon. So you will be sent a notification when my videos are out on the internet for all to see. So yes, thank you for joining me. Oh, and I am still looking for those dessert wines and that gooseberry wine. I'm listening to your comments. I love chatting with you guys. I love it when you bring things to the table that you've heard of or you haven't heard of, or you just want to talk about wine. It brings me so much joy. I get a smile on my face when I see that happening, and I can't wait to engage. So thank you. But with that being said, I am going to have another glass of cherry wine tonight. That'll be nice. And I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.